Get your ears wrapped around the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast. All the scoop you need to know, from college basketball to the NBA and even March Madness. News of your rising stars. Topics on and off the hardwood. This is the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast.
All right, guys, welcome to the GSMC Basketball Podcast. I'm your host on Mondays and Thursdays, Casey Foreman. How are you guys doing? Welcome to today's episode. This episode is brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. Like I said, welcome into today's episode, to today's podcast. A whole lot to talk about and discuss today. Like I talked about on my last episode, the NBA and the players, the NBPA, the Players Association, they're still working on an agreement, a plan for next season. I was hoping to have some more details and perhaps some concrete details as far as what the plan is. I discussed a couple of weeks ago the proposed plan, all the details in the proposed plan. However, they have yet to come to a concrete agreement. Like I said, I was hoping to have an update or so for you guys. The only update I do have is that there is none, and that they are still arguing, or I don't want to say arguing, they're still debating and going over everything, and like I said, they have yet to come to an agreement, so they're still hashing things out, and I'll let you guys know as soon as I know the concrete plans. I'll make sure to be reporting everything I know, again, as soon as I do. However, like I said, no new news. The only new news in the world of basketball, it's actually pretty interesting. Mike D'Antoni joins Steve Nash, joins his coaching staff in Brooklyn. And as we know, Mike D'Antoni and Steve have a history. I believe they were together. You know, D'Antoni was his coach, I believe, in Phoenix for a little while, and then as well as in Los Angeles when Steve first went there. So these two guys have worked together before. They have a history. They have a relationship. And very interesting to see him joining Steve's staff as an assistant coach, taking the step back as a head coach. Perhaps there weren't many or too many people calling his phone, you know, for that head coaching position. I'm sure he could have gotten a job anywhere, but I think this ultimately could be a really good move for Mike, joining Steve Nash's staff. It's going to help him, you know, boost his stock with KD and Kyrie, what they're going to do on the court, especially offensively. Mike D'Antoni will definitely be able to help them on the offensive side. Hopefully, they have someone else coming in for the defensive side. But, you know, as far as what the Nets are planning on doing, Steve Nash even said it himself. You know, we're playing for a championship. And if they can get that done, it's going to do nothing but boost D'Antoni's stock to hopefully find another head coaching job down the road. So I love the move, I really like the move for him to go to Brooklyn, take the step back, and take it year by year, boost his stock a little bit with the two superstars in Brooklyn. So I like that. As far as what today's episode is going to look like, though, today, I want to discuss, I want to take a look at the Western Conference, specifically all 15 teams in that Western Conference. Okay, so it's going to be a lengthy show for you. A whole lot of stuff going on, but I want to take a look, like I said, at all 15 Western Conference teams. You know, put myself in the general manager's chair, in the front office role, and discuss moves I think all 15 teams should make in this year's off season. You know, things they should do before the 2020-21 tip-off, either in December or January. Like I said, not sure up until that point. But yeah, let's take a look at all 15 teams in that Western Conference. We are only a few weeks away, I should remind you, from the NBA draft, and then after that, a couple of days following, will be the NBA's free agency. So we're only a couple of weeks away from that. A whole lot of things, like I said, hopefully will be taking place within the next couple of weeks. We're going to have even more stories regarding the draft, hopefully maybe some trades. I'm not sure if people are even allowed to make trades at this point. I think, do we have to wait until draft night to make trades? I'm not 100% certain. Either way, I am predicting a whole lot to go down in these next 3 weeks. Like I said, only 3 weeks away from those two events. But let's go ahead and take a look at and discuss 15 teams in that Western Conference. What should they do in this year's off season? We will start with the best conference. Okay, we're going to start, like I said, with the best conference, the Western Conference, and on Thursday, my next episode, on Thursday, we will break down the Eastern Conference. Okay, so let's go ahead and start out, like I said, with the Western Conference. We'll start down at the bottom of the conference from 15 all the way up to number 1 as far as the standings of last season. Let's start, like I said, at the bottom with the Golden State Warriors. Let's start with the Warriors. With a healthy, now at least, with a healthy Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, and Draymond Green. Okay, also this past season, they acquired Andrew Wiggins in next year's first-round pick from Minnesota for D'Angelo Russell. So they flipped the point guard, who they don't need anyway, get a forward, which they need in an asset down the road, next year's first-round pick for Minnesota. So Klay, Steph, and Draymond all healthy. They got Wiggins. They got the number 2 pick in this year's NBA draft, and then, like I said, next year's lottery pick for Minnesota. So they are setting themselves up to be real contenders once again. I talked about this a couple of weeks ago. I think they really will contend if healthy again. If they can stay healthy all year, I think this team will be back and contending for the title once again. But again, what I would do with these assets, with what they acquired over this past season, I would use the number 2 pick and trade it. I would use that pick to get an established player or a number of players in comparison to a rookie who is, yes, unproven, hasn't yet to play 1 minute, 1 dribble in the NBA. You never know. With busts, you never know with the NBA draft, especially with this year's NBA draft. It looks like it will be a lottery of sorts, definitely this year. So what I would do, I would skip the draft altogether, trade the number 2 pick for someone who knows who they want, for someone who needs the pick necessarily. So trade the pick, but you have 2 options with this number 2 pick, with the assets that you do have. You either trade it for an established, quote, all-star caliber player, all-star caliber talent, and as if you're wondering, players, Bradley Beal's been out there, Giannis is like the biggest name. People say they're going to trade Wiggins and the number 2 pick for Giannis. I think that is the most, overblown and overproportionated thing I've heard, but, Joel Embiid is another name. Like I said, Victor Oladipo, perhaps. So there are names out there. There are names out there are circulating in the media who the Warriors could and should trade for. So they could go the all-star route and stay top-heavy, similar to their championship rosters with Kevin Durant, a very top-heavy team. So they could take that route with the star top-heavy team, or they could take the other route and build depth. Like I said, you have Steph, Klay, Draymond, and Andrew Wiggins. So 4 players right there, established players. Clear 1, 2, 3, and 4 in their roles, clear veteran players, right? So you have 4 players there who are going to be part of your roster, part of your lineup, no doubt, big pieces of your roster. After that, maybe Eric Paschall, but after that, there's not a whole lot to discuss for Golden State. So if they want to get back to contention, like I said, they can either go the top-heavy route, or with this number 2 pick, with the $17 million trade exception, they could try to build the team similarly to when they won in 2015. Just a deep roster led by the stars and Steph, Clay, and Draymond, but a deep roster: Iguodala, Festus Ezeli, Mo Speight, Andrew Bogut, David Lee, Andre Iguodala, Sean Livingston. It goes on and on. They had players, okay? They had guys, Leandro Barbosa. They had guys ready to step up. It was next man up mentality, and they had the guy to step up. So they either can go the all-star route, or what I honestly think, I've been on the all-star route. I've been thinking that was the best route to take, but now I've been thinking about it for weeks now. I think the best thing for them to do is build the depth of this team. You have your stars. You have Steph, Clay, Draymond, Wiggins. They're going to take the majority of your shots, majority of your dribbles. You need the glue guys. You need the guys who are going to fill up the rest of that roster. And then why don't they go out and get guys like an Aaron Gordon, okay, a guy that the Magic are more than likely going to be moving off of anyway. So why don't you go out, use your $17 million trade exception for a guy like Aaron Gordon. You have free agents like Serge Ibaka, Marcus Gasol. So maybe you go out and sign, a big name free or a veteran free agent who maybe will sign for a minimum in hopes of winning a possible championship. So I say you go out and get guys like I said, like Aaron Gordon, Marcus Gasol, Serge Ibaka, shooters even like JJ Redick if you can go out and get him. No matter what it is, you need to build depth. This team also needs defense. So you go out there, you use your pick, your $17 million trade exception, and you ditch the top-heavy route because you saw how that left you in the 2019 finals when KD got hurt. When Clay got hurt, it was Quinn Cook out there playing and Alfonso McKinney out there playing. You don't want that happening again. You build depth with the $17 million trade exception with your number 2 pick. You get players who have played in the league before who can come in and contribute right away unless there's a big name out there that you simply cannot pass, like an Embiid, a Giannis, a Bradley Beal. So unless there's a guy like that available, you ditch that and you go with building your team's depth. You miss the draft. You miss the top heavy by getting a big name or a decently big name like Victor Oladipo or something. I miss me with that. You build the depth. Get guys like Aaron Gordon, Serge Ibaka, maybe Marcus Gasol, guys, glue guys to come in, help contribute, help you win a championship right away. Okay, so that's what the Golden State Warriors should do. Let's talk about the Minnesota Timberwolves. The Timberwolves, who have the number 1 pick in this year's NBA draft, their 3rd number 1 overall pick in recent years, so they're back in the draft lottery, back at the top. They get their pick. They have the pick in this year's NBA draft. They also just got a franchise point guard. They're seemingly their franchise point guard in D'Angelo Russell. It seems like they've been eyeing him for a while now. They were finally able to pull off the trade, get Wiggins out of town, get him to a place more suitable for him, like Golden State. Timberwolves got a guy they have been looking after for a while in D'Angelo Russell, and an all-star in this league now in Brooklyn. An all-star took that team to the playoffs. But if I was the Minnesota Timberwolves with that number 1 pick, I would select Anthony Edwards from Georgia. I simply would. I think he is, I don't know about the best player, but maybe coming out of college, maybe he will be able to translate quicker than some others. Maybe LaMelo might take some a season or so because of his size. I'm not quite sure. LaMelo might translate right away. I don't know. Either way, I select Anthony Edwards, the shooting guard who can do it on both sides. He has a ceiling to be very good on both sides of the ball, and I continue to build with my 2 all-stars in Karl Anthony Towns and D'Angelo Russell. You have this duo together for the first time next season, so hopefully putting them together. I think D'Angelo is a better player than Wiggins, scores more points, can create for others as well. So I'm excited to see the tandem of Russell and Towns. And then you add a guy who can score, go get his own shot in Anthony Edwards. Like I said, I think Edwards has upsides on both sides of the basketball. We know the Timberwolves kind of rushed it before, put all their chips into the Jimmy Butler trade. They got Wiggins, they got Towns, Jimmy Butler, Jeff Teague. They put this team together with Tom Thibodeau. seemed a little bit rushed, like I said. Now, I don't think they really have anything to lose. You continue to build with your 2-star foundational pieces in Towns and Russell. You get Anthony Edwards. You try to develop him, and hopefully you got 3 all-star caliber players there who can lead you down the road, maybe competing for playoff appearance. I don't want to say championships because they haven't even been in the playoffs for years, besides that one stunt with Jimmy Butler when they got swept by the Rockets. So I don't want to say championships, but maybe they can start competing for playoff spots with those 3 guys in Edwards, Towns, and Russell. Like I said, you continue to build. Don't necessarily trade it for a guy you're not sold on. But yes, you continue to build, nothing to lose. You have your 3rd overall pick in recent years, in recent history. What, like you got Towns, they had Wiggins, and now they're going to get Edwards. So 3 number 1 overall picks. They've had. Now they have Russell, Towns. They can add Edwards. Nothing to lose. You continue to build with the pieces you have, and hopefully down the road, in a couple of years, you can start pushing for that playoff spot. I want to take a quick break. When I come back, though, we will continue discussing the Western Conference. When I come back, the first team to discuss will be the New Orleans Pelicans. Don't go anywhere. I will be right back.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines, they got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
All right, welcome back. Like I said before the break, let's continue on discussing all 15 teams in the Western Conference, putting myself in the GM, in that front office role, discussing what these teams should do in this year's off season. Let's pick up right where we left off with the New Orleans Pelicans. After a disappointing end to this season, hoping to make that 8th spot, being favored to make the 8th spot in that Orlando bubble. They obviously failed to make that and fire the head coach. After that, they honestly didn't wait, I should say. They didn't wait long to make a change. They hire Stan Van Gundy, so they already replaced basically the entire coaching staff, it seems like. So they made the change where the change was needed. But as far as what they need to continue to do, their work is not done in this year's off season. The only the change to the coaching staff was not the only one needed for New Orleans, I should say. What they should do going forward, the first thing I do if I'm New Orleans, I call Brandon Ingram on the night of free agency, or even before. I'm sure they've been talking before. Like I said, free agency does not start. Usually it starts on July 1st, my birthday. Not anymore, obviously. I used to have something to look forward to always, not so much anymore. But free agency does not start on the supposed start date. We know these conversations are happening all year, all off season. So I'm sure New Orleans and Brandon have come to an agreement or have a number or have discussed their plans going forward. But either way, the first thing I do if I'm New Orleans is extend Brandon Ingram and Lonzo Ball. Lonzo will be a free agent next year. Well, not this year, next season. Lonzo Ball will be up for his contract will be up. This year, like I said, Brandon Ingram is a free agent. So I call Brandon Ingram first. I get him on the phone. I extend him, get pen on paper, lock him up, the first-time All-Star guy capable of scoring 25 points per night, if not more, in this league. So I lock him up, make him my number 2 guy, if not my number 1 scorer on my team long term. So I extend Brandon Ingram and I extend Lonzo Ball if I can as soon as possible. You traded Anthony Davis for basically those 2 players, and I know some picks and stuff like that, and some other things, but you gave up Anthony Davis for these 2 guys. You don't want to lose them after simply a season or 2. So I extend Brandon Ingram and Lonzo Ball because of what you gave up to get them. They also have cap room. Okay, they have cap space, but with no big name free agents this year, it's like, oh, they should go out and sign Who should they, Anthony Davis, right? No. Okay, they just traded him away. Okay, so no big name free agents despite them having cap room. If there was a guy out there, it would be really interesting if they could lure him, like I said, but get him to New Orleans with Zion, with that young group they do have. But again, with no big name free agent, with the cap space that they do have, I use it on getting depth, on building around my young stars. You have your franchise point guard in Lonzo Ball. You got a shooting guard in Drew Holiday. You get your forwards in Zion and Brandon Ingram. You have Jackson Hayes, I believe that's his name, for your center if you decide put him at the center position. So you have your young pieces. You have your foundational pieces. If you're New Orleans, what you do now is you continue to build around them. You keep guys like JJ Redick. You get guys like JJ Redick to come into town and buy in to help develop and play with these young potential stars, right? You got Zion, Lonzo, Brandon Ingram. So you got appealing pieces. You just now got to get the right veterans, the right depth around them. So you keep JJ Redick, you get depth around them, you keep developing your young players. And like I said, you extend Brandon Ingram, you got your coaching staff taken care of. You keep those young guys around as long as you can because you gave up your franchise player to do so. Use that cap room to build depth around them while you have it. And don't use all of it, however, because in the coming years, we know free agency, big names will be available again. So save that money, though. Save a little bit in that back pocket for a possible free agent down the road. But again, you got to spend what you need to keep Brandon Ingram and Lonzo Ball in town, as well as JJ Redick. And they got their coaching staff, but yeah, that's what you should do in New Orleans. As far as the Sacramento Kings, Sacramento, a team that was somewhat close to making the postseason this year. They were part of the 22 teams that went to Orlando. They were competing for that 8th spot. They had a tough seeding game schedule and really never had a good chance. Didn't play that good in the bubble, quite frankly. But if I'm the Sacramento Kings, I pick up my club or my team option on both De'Aaron Fox and Marvin Bagley. Both of those guys have tremendous upside, especially De'Aaron Fox. It definitely has all-star potential. So you lock those guys up. You use your team option on both of them and start working on extensions if you can. Like I said, you extend De'Aaron Fox. Maybe you wait on Bagley. You definitely pick up his team option. Maybe you wait to extend him. But you definitely, as soon as you can, you extend De'Aaron Fox to keep him in Sacramento. They also have, I should remind you, they have $30 million in cap room, the Sacramento Kings do have. So they have options. If a free agent is willing to listen to a pitch, like a guy maybe like Brandon Ingram, right? What if him and the Pelicans can't come to an agreement? If I'm the Sacramento Kings, I go out there and get Brandon Ingram, who is a free agent. Again, if the Pelicans cannot sign him or lock him down long term, you go all out, all in on a guy who can score 25 points per night. Definitely something you guys need, a bigger name He played in Los Angeles before. I'm sure he would rather live in Sacramento than New Orleans. So, still in California. So, yes, if I am Sacramento, I extend De'Aaron Fox. I pick up the option on both Fox and Bagley. But if a guy like Brandon Ingram slips through the fingers of New Orleans, I go out there and I go all out and I try to get a guy like Brandon Ingram. Or what if a guy like DeMar DeRozan, who could be a free agent this year, also from California, what if he was available and leaves San Antonio or sign and trade San Antonio with a little thing in return? Hey, screw it. A team like Sacramento, what do you have to lose adding an all-star caliber player, a veteran player to your young group? What if a guy like DeMar DeRozan is available with your cap space? Do you go out there and get him? If you're the Sacramento Kings, do you go out and get a guy like Brandon Ingram, or maybe a glue guy, a very good player like Gallinari who's available? He, over the past couple of years, has been a part of teams who have overachieved. Maybe he comes there, gives them, 18 points a night, can be a third option for them or a second scoring option even for them, can step up for the young guys when they necessarily can't. So maybe a guy like Gallinari is a really good pick. Either way, if I'm the Kings, I pick up the options on Fox and Bagley, extend Fox if I can, and if I can, I make a pursuit. I go all out on a guy like Brandon Ingram if he's available. The San Antonio Spurs. What about the San Antonio Spurs, a team whose 20-year streak, almost 20-year streak of making the playoffs, 20 years straight of playoff appearances, after that has officially come to an end, what should they do? Okay, what should they do? They've been relevant for so long now, but with the team that they do have, honestly, they keep being less relevant. Like I said, failing to make the playoffs for the first time in decades. If I was in San Antonio, I would trade DeMar DeRozan and I would trade LaMarcus Aldridge if possible. I would get rid of both those players. I'm not saying neither of them have basketball left, but it's not like you didn't have them all season and you failed to make the playoffs. DeMar played 60-something games, almost 70 games. LaMarcus played almost 60 games as well. So these guys played pretty much all season for you, and you still failed to make the playoffs. I know you had your ups and downs, but I don't think the tandem of DeMar and LaMarcus Aldridge is necessarily working long-term or even short-term, quite frankly. So what I do is I call any team that wants them. I trade DeMar DeRozan and LaMarcus Aldridge, and I get either some young players, some young assets, like I already have Brian Forbes, DeJounte Murray. They have a couple other young pieces. Jacob Poeltl, they have a couple of multiple young players, I should say. So either I continue to build on my young assets and build up a stock of young assets, or I get a haul of draft picks for my two all-stars or former all-stars who both still have basketball left to play. So I trade both of them. I start the rebuild. I start the rebuild, quite frankly. Like I said, you failed to make the playoffs despite both of your stars playing all season. I don't think the fit is there. I don't think DeMar is the best fit there. I think LaMarcus is just getting older and older. So yeah, I rebuild it, I reboot it, and I start early. Why keep losing with these two players? I clear cap space, get them out of there, and maybe a team like Minnesota with that number one over. We saw it years back. They traded Levine for Butler. Maybe they're willing to take a call on DeRozan. They trade the number one pick for DeMar DeRozan, right? San Antonio, you get the number one pick, and then Minnesota gets an established veteran all-star to play with D'Angelo Russell and Karl Anthony Towns. So, maybe that would work. Maybe New York would give up a haul or a lot of draft picks, or maybe the young players that they do in fact have. Maybe New York would give up a haul for the two all-stars, for both of them even. So I call up teams. I get rid of both LaMarcus and DeMar. Not that neither of them have basketball left to play. They definitely do. It's just that it's clearly not working. You guys aren't contending, let alone making the playoffs. So I know it's the first year out of 20 years, and I may be pulling the alarm, but I think it's time to pull the alarm, the fire alarm, and blow it up, clear that cap space, and start rebuilding. Start trying to build your next Spurs dynasty, which, quite frankly, it probably won't ever do, but still, I rebuild, I clear my cap space, reboot it. The West is getting better and better. You're not going to be able to win it with DeMar DeRozan and LaMarcus Aldridge. You reboot it, get as much as you can for those two players while you still can. Like I said, what about the Phoenix Suns? The Phoenix Suns, a team out there who had a very impressive record in the Orlando bubble, going 8-0. It's obvious they have their franchise guy, their franchise player in Devin Booker. That's obvious, like I said. But he still needs help. Obviously, cannot get it done by himself, averaging insane, I think averaged 25 points per game this year? Either way, all-star caliber numbers. He is not getting the recognition he deserves either, but it's because of his team's record, the way his team has been playing, similar to a guy like Bradley Beal who balls out, but on a bad team. Okay, we look at your team's overall record, say, yes, you're playing good, but obviously not that good because your team is losing. That's what people play, even though all-star stuff is an individual accolade, an individual achievement. People tend to look at more than just the person's performance, that individual person's stat line. So a guy like Devin Booker, if he wants the recognition he deserves, it's time for Phoenix to start winning. He has his secondary, somewhat co-star in DeAndre Ayton, who does need to improve. He's going to be going into his third NBA season. It's time for him to improve, get over. He is averaging 18 and 11. You need to see him more at the 23 and 12, maybe 23 and 10, 24 and 10 mark. More scoring from him. You definitely need, because like I said, Booker can't do it by himself. They definitely looked impressive and showed promise in the Orlando bubble, I should say. And they do have $20 million in cap space. Again, I'm not quite sure as far as a big name free agent out there. There really isn't one this year. So I don't use all my $20 million, obviously, but what I go out there and I fill the holes in my roster. I get veterans. I get guys who have been there and done that, because they have a very young team in Phoenix, guys who haven't been there and done that, being led by a guy who hasn't even been an all-star in this league, in Devin Booker. So this is a very young team being led by Monty Williams, a first-time head coach as well. So they are learning as they go, and adding some veterans to this team will do nothing but help them, help accelerate their path to the playoffs, I think. So you go out there, you sign some veterans, because honestly, if I'm Devin Booker on this Phoenix Sun team, I don't just stick around for forever, okay? It's time for Phoenix to start winning, or else they might be in jeopardy to be losing their franchise guy in Devin Booker. So it's time to show up or shut up, quite frankly. It's time to start winning, or they might be losing their franchise guy. I don't know how long Devin Booker will stick around in Phoenix just to lose. He's not even getting all-star appearances, right? So what is he getting from that relationship? Next to nothing. It's time for them to start winning. I signed veterans. I fill holes in the roster. You have, like I said, you have your pieces in Booker and Ayton. You have a point guard in Rubio. So you need to fill out the rest of your roster with veterans, guys who have been there, done that before, to help accelerate your path to the playoffs. It's time to start winning for the Phoenix Suns. Guys, I'm going to take a quick break. When I come back, we'll dive right back into this, starting up with the Memphis Grizzlies. Don't go anywhere. I will be right back.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
All right, everybody, welcome back. Like I said before the break, let's continue on taking a look and discussing this Western Conference, what all 15 teams should do in this year's off season. Let's pick up right where we left off again with the Memphis Grizzlies. Not too much to discuss for Memphis, a team that has their salary cap pretty much filled up with a lot of nothing, quite frankly. So not a whole lot that the Grizzlies are capable of doing in this year's offseason. The priority for Memphis, you keep Ja happy. You finally have a franchise, an all-star caliber player in Memphis. You hit the lottery last year with the number 2 overall pick. You definitely made the right decision in Ja Morant. So what you do in Memphis is really simple. You keep him happy. You talk to him, you ask him what he wants you to do, you keep him happy. Again, the team doesn't really have cap space, so there really isn't a whole lot for them to do, quite frankly. But as far as who their cap space is tied up with, you could say, simply trade those guys, right? If it's tied up with players you don't necessarily like, who can't help you contribute or win, flip them for players who can help you, right? I wish it was that easy, right? But it would be if they had assets, and quite frankly, they really don't. The cap space is tied up with players like Gorgie Dang, Valanciunas, Justice Winslow, Miles Plumlee. So it's tied up with players who aren't necessarily all-stars in this league, or necessarily big pieces necessarily in the league. So it's tied up with players I don't know that a whole lot of other teams are wanting, are needing. So not a whole lot of moves you can make if you're Ja Morant. So if you are the Memphis Grizzlies, you simply talk to your guy in Ja, let him know, hey, we're still rebuilding, obviously. You were the first step to our rebuild. We played really good last year. We took a step forward, and we almost made the playoffs. We were a game away from making the playoffs, and we thought we'd simply be, rebuilding all year. Stay with us, stick with us. We're gonna get better, but again, we gotta figure out this salary cap. We gotta figure out our cap space, where we're giving our money and to whom. So if I'm them, I simply bite the bullet. I try to get rid of all these pieces that I am simply overpaying. Try to get rid of these price tags, so down the road, when it is time to get Ja that complimentary piece, you are able to do so, and you aren't locked in and unable to make moves, like a Bucks, like the Milwaukee Bucks with Giannis Antetokounmpo, kind of locked into their situation now, roughly, and not too much for them to do, kind of locked in with their star guy. Ultimately might lead to their star player leaving. That is exactly what Memphis doesn't want. So you keep Ja happy. You made him the face of the franchise. It's easy. So you keep him happy. You move off the contracts if you can, and continue to build and get better with experience and time. Not too much to do in this year's offseason for the Memphis Grizzlies. For the Portland Trail Blazers, a team that does not have any cap space, quite frankly. They have about $4 million they can use, so maybe a couple of small minimum deals that they can go out and sign, but really no real cap space. But what I would do if I was the Portland Trail Blazers, this is something I've been thinking about for a while, and this is a piece I think would fit well in Portland. If I'm the Trail Blazers, I go out and I try to get Kevin Love. Okay, a guy who is in Cleveland, a guy who can spread the floor, shoot the 3-ball, shoot the mid-range, can play defense. It can be a post presence as well. So I go out and get a guy like Kevin Love. The Cavs are rebuilding. I doubt it takes too much to acquire him. So really, I trade Hassan Whiteside. I honestly, whatever they want besides McCollum. And maybe you keep Gary Trent Jr. and then Lillard. You keep those 3 players. Besides that, you trade whatever else they want, some draft picks, whatever. You get Kevin Love. I don't think it would take that much, quite frankly, but you get Kevin Love. You get outside shooting, you got defense, and you have a veteran IQ guy who has been there, done that, can help you win some games as well. So I go out there and I get Kevin Love if I'm the Portland Trail Blazers. They also need to go and re-sign Carmelo. What he did for them was fantastic. So I go out and I re-sign Carmelo. I try to trade because they need another piece. What they have now will not get it done. They need one more all-star level piece. Maybe a guy like Kevin Love could get it done. Big who can spread the floor. But maybe that they also need a defensive wing though. When I'm thinking about it, they need a defensive wing. So maybe you go out and sign like a guy like Andre Robertson, who's going to be a free agent from OKC. So maybe you go out and try to sign him to a contract on the wing who you can throw at guys like LeBron and such. But either way, I try to trade Hassan Whiteside a pick or so for Kevin Love. I re-sign Carmelo, and then I go out and try to sign in free agency a defensive wing. We saw in the playoffs their lack of defense. So trading Whiteside, try to get K-Love, re-sign Carmelo, try to add some defense to your roster. Let's talk about the Dallas Mavericks, a team that is very interesting to me, a team that people definitely need to be looking out for in the coming seasons, if not next year. Luka and Porzingis, I think it's safe to say the duo works. I think they play very well together, and Dallas has their two players. They have their foundational pieces. Now it's time to find veterans who will sign for minimum like deals, who want to come and play with these talented players like Doncic and Kristaps. So now it's time to find veterans who will sign for minimums. You also want to keep guys who you have on the roster now like Tim Hardaway Jr., Seth Curry, guys who can knock down the three-pointer at high clips, high levels. So you want to keep Curry, keep Tim Hardaway Jr., try to find veterans for a minimum. Also, they need tougher defensive, gritty grind guys to take care and I don't want to take care, but protect Luka, who gets beat up night in and night out. So they need a tougher piece to come in, be the tough guy, right, and protect the two guys in Kristaps. And not to say they need protecting, but maybe a guy, like I said earlier, in Andre Robertson, maybe one of the one of the Morris twins, like Marcus Morris. Maybe you go out and sign him. We know Morris and the Clippers and the Mavericks were beefing in that series they have. Maybe he's exactly what you need on the court. A tough guy who sticks up for Luka and isn't afraid of getting messy when you need to. So maybe they need a guy like Marcus Morris or a guy like Andre Robertson. So they need tough defensive pieces, veteran players who will sign for minimums. And you heard this here. Okay, you heard it here first. I think Luka Doncic will be a top 3 candidate, if not the MVP in next year's season. I'm calling it now. My preseason pick, thinking about it, all things considered, I was trying to decipher maybe Luka, maybe Steph, maybe Kevin Durant with this comeback season he's hopefully going to have. But Luka right now might be my best pick, my prediction for MVP next year. They need someone, though, to protect their guys. I definitely, like I said, look out for this team. They're going to win some games next year. Need defensive pieces, but the good thing is for Dallas, you have your foundational guys. Now it's time to just put the right pieces around them and go ball. Watch out for this Dallas Maverick team going forward. The Utah Jazz. Okay, the Utah Jazz. Not a whole lot, if any, changes, honestly, coming for Utah, I think, in this year's offseason. They've been so aggressive in prior seasons, in prior off-seasons, getting guys like Bogdanovich, Mike Conley, Jordan Clarkson this past year, coming off the bench for a sixth man. So they have been aggressive. They're going out and getting the pieces they need. They needed a franchise point guard, boom, Mike Conley. They needed a sixth man, boom, Jordan Clarkson. And they need an outside three-point shooter, Bogdanovich, who got injured in this year's postseason, or before the postseason. So I think that had a big factor going into their success. They're missing their best three-point shooter, I should remind you. So they've been so aggressive, like I said, over prior seasons. I don't think we're going to be seeing too many things going on for the Utah Jazz. Like I said, they got Bogdanovich, Conley, and Clarkson in recent years, and they also already have their 2 all-star pieces in Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert. They have their two guys. They have their center. They have their shooting guard. They have their point guard. They have a shooter. They have a six-man coming off the bench. They have Joe Ingles. They have their coach. So this team seemingly has all of the pieces that they need. As far as winning a championship goes, we know how tough that is, but they are ready to compete. And again, I don't think they need that much on this roster. Obviously, every team can improve. Well, again, I'm not sure in this year's offseason there's much for them to do at all. So for the Utah Jazz, the only thing I think that can help them will be time and experience, because their biggest issues last year were injuries and building team chemistry. So over seasons, over another year or so, I think the team will mesh, will click, and start playing some better basketball. Hopefully they can stay healthy. Another year, I think, some more time and experience will be the biggest help the biggest thing to help the Utah Jazz. Not a whole lot to do in this year's season. Let's talk about the Oklahoma City Thunder. The Oklahoma City Thunder, after overachieving in this year's, I think we can all agree they overachieved. After overachieving in this year's regular season, even postseason, taking the Houston Rockets 7 games, something I don't think I saw it going perhaps six, but for them, after going down 2-0, they tie it to 2-2. They went down 3-2. They then force a game 7, and they're one basket away from beating the Rockets in 7 games, beating the guy they just traded away in Russell Westbrook and James Harden, the 2 MVPs. So yeah, they were one play away from beating the Houston Rockets, and like I said, overachieving all year. In a year, people expected them to be rebuilding. They fired their head coach, which I did not quite understand. So now I think it's clear they are going to be continuing the rebuild, the reboot, okay? And I know he was great for them, but I would go out and I would get a haul for Chris Paul. I would get as much as I can. His stock has not been higher in recent years. He proved he is still an established all-star, all-NBA player in this league, can lead a team. So if I'm them, I go out and talk to a team like the Milwaukee Bucks for an example, and I get as much as I can from Milwaukee, a team who obviously needs Chris Paul. So and even if it's not Milwaukee, I take a look around the league and I get as much possible for CP3. I also try to trade a guy in Steven Adams, a guy who I'm trading, or who they're paying $20+ million per year, just to sometimes play 20 minutes, and then sit on the bench for the rest of the game. So for the way teams are playing with small ball and such, so I trade Steven Adams to a team who really needs him. Maybe the Clippers need a center. Maybe the Boston Celtics. Either way, I trade Stevens to a team who needs a defensive center. And again, I continue the rebuild. I clear up my cap space. I trade CP3, Steven Adams, and get as much as I can. I continue to make moves and build for the future. They're already in a really good spot from trading Russell Westbrook and Paul George in the haul they got for trading those two players. So what I would do, I continue to rebuild. I get another haul for Chris Paul. I get something in return for Steven Adams. I clear my cap space. I continue to build with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and the young group you have and Dennis Schroeder. And I build through the draft. I use my assets if needed and get another all-star caliber player down the road. Either way, I continue the rebuild in Oklahoma City. I want to go ahead and take my final break, guys. My final break. Coming back, we got 3 teams to discuss: the Nuggets, the Clippers, and the Lakers. 3 teams to discuss when I come back. I will be right back.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts, past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
All right, everybody, welcome back. A quick brain fart actually at the end of last segment. I actually have 4 teams to discuss very quickly at the end of the show today. The Rockets, the Nuggets, the Clippers, and the Lakers. Let's get to it very quickly. Thankfully, the Rockets, not much to discuss for Houston. For a team that has their cap space locked up and basically 2 players or 3 players in Gordon, Westbrook, and Harden. So cap room, none to talk about basically. They just parted ways, I should say, with their head coach and with their front office. Just filled both of those roles. They have their new head coach in Steven Silas. So if I am the Houston Rockets, again, not too much to do, but if I'm them, I try and move off of the contract and the player in Eric Gordon, who is no longer the player, the 6th man of the year he was years prior. So I move off of Aaron Gordon and the contract associated with him. I'm not quite sure as far as how much I can get in return, if there are even people out there wanting a guy like Aaron Gordon for the price tag attached to him. Either way, I try to move off of that salary to try to get a little bit of cap space for going forward. But again, since I did just hire a new head coach in Steven Silas, hopefully now this new head coach, right? He's been an assistant for decades, but this new head coach, hopefully he can come in, get this team to click with the right system, with the right game plan. I don't think D'Antoni's system was it for Westbrook and Harden. It was perfect for Harden and CP3. They needed a reboot, a restart as far as the game plan and system goes. So hopefully with Silas, he can come in and implement the proper system needed. Also, they no longer have Daryl Morey, the move maker, as I like to call him. So more than likely, I don't see this roster changing a whole bunch. I think the biggest move was adding Silas. Hopefully the addition of his game plan and his system will be the biggest change. Either way, not too many changes that could happen with the salary cap that they do have, the way theirs is arranged and locked up. So likely this roster will stay the same unless we see it getting blown up with them, trading Russell Westbrook or James Harden, which I think is very unlikely. But unless we see a blow up of sorts, a complete rebuild, I think overall this roster will be staying the same. Hopefully the new lineup, the new game plans and system of Steven Silas will be the only change needed for this Houston Rocket team. However, I'm not so sure, and I think the Westbrook-Harden era in Houston might be a short-lived era. I give it one more try, but you don't want to beat a dead horse. So not too much going on for the Houston Rockets. Biggest thing is the addition, the changes in the front office and the coaching staff. The Denver Nuggets. Okay, the Denver Nuggets, a team who had a quite impressive postseason, coming back from down 3-1 to different time. They also established they have a franchise point guard in Jamal Murray. They have a franchise center in Nikola Jokic, and they have a franchise forward in Michael Porter Jr., it seems like. So you establish some positions, some players, which is a good thing. They however, don't have any cap space. But again, since they have their franchise point guard, their center, their power, or their forward. So they have their foundational pieces, which is good. They have their pieces locked up. Now it's time to look and sign veterans for the minimum. Maybe they go out there and get, I think overall they have offensive pieces. Overall, I think I focus on defense. If I'm the Denver Nuggets, I go out there and sign defensive pieces. I don't think it hurts them. Overall, though, a very young team, time and experience will be the biggest thing to help this Denver Nugget team. We won't see too many changes in this year's offseason, not too much to do. They have their franchise players. It seems like now it's time to continue to develop them and build and put the right glue guys, the right small pieces around them. They have their foundational guys. It's time to build off of it and simply learn with experience. Not too much going on for Denver going forward. Again, they have their guys. You simply got to get better over time. Now, the two final teams I've been looking forward to discuss. I didn't want to do it first. I thought I'd go top to bottom, or bottom to top, obviously. I talk a whole bunch about, these two Los Angeles teams, obviously, here at GSMC. But the two teams I've been waiting to discuss, the Los Angeles Clippers and the Los Angeles Lakers. We know how talented this Los Angeles Clipper team is. I don't think there is any need to blow it up. No need to blow it up. You have your franchise players in Paul George and Kawhi Leonard, most importantly. So no need to blow it up. Perhaps, though, it's time to go out, add some more shooters, add some playmakers. A guy that comes to mind, a guy that has been in the media, a guy like Rajon Rondo, who can come in and create for others, also has an IQ which is out of this world. So a guy like Rajon Rondo, for his leadership on and off of the court, a guy like Rondo could do many good things for this Clipper team, again, on and off of the court, creates for others, and can be a leader, a stable leader for this team who obviously needs it. They also need a post presence, okay? We know Montrezl Harrell, he's no down low post threat, so they need a big guy, a guy who can get down there and bang with Anthony Davis, with Nikola Jokic, who obviously tore them apart. So maybe a guy like Marc Gasol, maybe Steven Adams, who's available. Maybe you go and try to get like an Enes Kanter, or maybe try to get JaVale McGee or Dwight Howard from LA. Thon Maker and Tristan Thompson are also going to be free agents. So either way, they need to go out there and get a big guy, a guy who is over 6'10", 6'11", if not a 7-footer, who can bang in the paint, get rebounds, get offensive boards, get blocks. Basically, a guy who can mess with, who can disrupt Anthony Davis, Nikola Jokic, Joel Embiid, the big centers in the league. Right now, the Clippers don't have a guy like that. This team is talented enough to win it all. Definitely is talented enough to win it all. But they need the right system, the right game plan, and perhaps Ty Lue will be, maybe they don't need, more pieces or players. Maybe they have everything they need, and maybe the system and the game plan is the biggest thing. I know now Ty Lue being the head coach, different game plan coming in. He's a different type of head coach than Doc Rivers, more of the players coach, right? So maybe that is the biggest change that's needed for the Clippers. Either way, I think they need an established leader. They need a little more offense, perhaps a guy who can create shots for others, and then a post presence to disrupt a guy like Anthony Davis, Nikola Jokic, Joel Embiid, because they are without one. So in recap, Rajon Rondo, a post presence, maybe a 3-point shooter or so, is exactly what the Clippers need to compete overall, though I think not too many changes needed. I think they simply choked in this year's postseason, and they were definitely capable of winning it all. Okay, now that's all I want to talk about for the Clippers. Let's now move on to the Los Angeles Lakers, the champs, okay? But despite winning this year's title, we know there were holes in this roster. This team, if it does want a chance to repeat or go back-to-back next year, it needs to update. They need to update their roster. Obviously, the majority of the cap room is going to be used on LeBron James, on Anthony Davis. Rightfully so. You got to pay your two stars, your All-NBA, your NBA history, your two stars, LeBron and AD. Of course, they're going to take up most of your cap space. But after that, they do have some room to work with. I know most of it gets brought up by Danny Green. I'll get to that in a second. But as far as what I would do, and you need to keep Rajon Rondo. I know the Clippers are wanting him, but if I'm the Lakers, I don't let them get him. I keep my hands on Rajon Rondo, and I keep Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, who was huge in the postseason for the Lakers. So I keep Rondo and KCP. Besides that, I'm honestly willing to move anybody, and Avery Bradley. They need to keep their hands on Avery Bradley as well. So Bradley, Rondo, and KCP, maybe JaVale McGee and Dwight Howard as well, and maybe Marcus Morris. If they're willing to sign on minimum deals, you keep Morris, Dwight, and JaVale if you can. But if they're not, the biggest pieces I'm worried about are Bradley, KCP, and Rondo, and then maybe one of your big guys like Dwight, JaVale, and Morris. Besides that, anyone is available for LA. At least they should be available for LA, I would also be shopping. Kyle Kuzma and Danny Green. Danny Green, who takes up the third most on the salary cap with $14 million, and then Kuzma, the only young asset on the team. So I would be shopping Kyle Kuzma and Danny Green. The only question is, how high, how high are people on Kuzma, on Danny Green? Maybe they go out and can get a guy like Victor Oladipo, whose asking price has never been lower, whose stock has never been lower. So maybe they take a chance on a guy like Oladipo, trade Kuzma, Green, and Quinn Cook, or maybe any picks. If you have any picks left, you scrounge down and get some picks left. But maybe they go out and get a guy like Victor Oladipo, whose, again, price has never been lower, quite frankly. I think guys like Chris Paul, Bradley Beal, I think the asking price will be far too high for those two players, unless, like I've been saying, they're much higher on Kyle Kuzma than I am. Either way, Oladipo might even be pushing. I think Oladipo might be the best caliber player they could get, since the asking price is so low for him. Either way, I shop Green, I shop Kuzma, I go after veterans for the minimum in free agents. Wesley Matthews, who's a shooter, is going to be available. Austin Rivers is going to be available. Alec Burks is going to be available. So I go out there, I sign guys like those guys who have been in the league before, who can knock down shots. So I go and get shooters. I'm not sure if any of Los Angeles' pieces, if any of their pieces are attractive to other teams, quite frankly. But I know that veterans will sign in Los Angeles simply for a chance to win a ring. So will signing veteran pieces be enough, or will they be able to pull off a trade like a Kyle Kuzma, trading Kuzma and Green for a guy like Victor Oladipo, or perhaps maybe if they're so high on Kuzma, maybe guys like Chris Paul or Bradley Beal. Either way, this team needs to update if they want a chance to repeat, if they want a chance to go back to back. So LA, you keep KCP, you keep Rondo, you shop Kuzma and Danny Green to clear up some cap space. Obviously Kuzma being, your only young asset. So you shop those two players as much as you can. Try to get as much as you can in return, some veteran established guys, because again, you gotta update the roster if you want a chance to go back to back. Okay, we've seen it in prior years, teams that do go back to back. If you look at the roster, it's usually not the exact same players, and if it is, more than likely that team will not be going back to back. Either way, though, that's it, guys. That was a look at every team in the Western Conference, putting myself in the general manager, in the front office role, if you will. And with the Western Conference being as competitive as it was this past year, and if these teams, like I just got done talking about, if these teams can make the necessary moves, I think the West will do nothing but improve. The Warriors, they're going to be back next year. I think Dallas is going to improve. The Denver is going to improve over time and mature. Can the Lakers do what is necessary to repeat? Either way, I think it's obvious the West is still the best conference in basketball. Next episode, however, on my next episode on Thursday, I'm going to take a look at the Eastern Conference. Do what I did today, take a look at all 15 teams in the Eastern Conference, put myself again in the general manager spot, in the front office role, break down what those 15 teams should do in this year's off-season. Since they are the inferior conference in comparison to the West, I'm not sure if there'll be more to discuss and certain more moves necessary or less. Either way, though, the East will be coming. The West is the best. That's going to be it, though, for the GSMC Basketball Podcast. Thank you all for your continued support. Go check us out on Facebook, on Twitter. Leave us a comment, a review on whatever platform you are listening on. Again, this is my first podcast of the week on Thursday. Make sure you guys check back here at the GSMC Basketball Podcast for the Eastern Conference. Thank you all for your continued support. I will see you on Thursday. Thanks for listening.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.goldenstatemedia.com. GSMCpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. From movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.